So in order to work with custom alerts and everything, I've added 3 new files to our project, and I would provide them to you with the project resources here. So basically one of them is overlay, which is an overlay loader basically, which would show uh, to the users while an API call is being made. Then there's the haptics, which is basically, you must have noticed while using Apple software as well, haptics give you this feedback whenever you touch a button or there's a success or a failure case. And there's the toast thing, which is internally being used by overlay. So these things are there, and now what we can do is that you can go inside our custom folder, click on command and choose a Swift file and name this custom alert view controller. So this would be our UI view controller. So let's just go about creating it. We create a class custom view controller. We conform it to UI view controller. We open this up. Now inside UIKit, firstly we need to define what all elements we are going to use, and then we need to define how we lay them out. So it's a bit different from Swift UI, and obviously it has a lot more code to work around with, but then it has its own usefulness. So let's just start by creating some private lazy var um, objects. So basically it would be a container view which would conform to the type UI view. Let's open this up, and this would be like a function actually. So we could do something like this, and let's do let view equals UI view. Let's initialize the class. Then we can have view dot layer, and then we can give it some corner radius, which would be like 16 pixels. Then we can have view dot border width, which we can have like 2 pixels. Then we can give it some border color as well. So view dot layer dot border color, that would be equal to UI color dot white dot CG color. So it actually takes in a CG color argument. So we are doing that. Let's just return our view so that it stops throwing us this error. And now we need to do this very important step, which says translate auto resizing mask into constraints, because we are not using storyboards here, we are doing it programmatically. So that is why we need to do that. For the background color, let's just give it some system background color. So on the basis of dark or light mode, this would change up. Now what we can do is that we can copy this thing, or maybe let's just create one more, because copying won't actually be a good idea. So we could do title label. So title label would conform to UI label, and let's open this up. Basically let's open the function up, and now we can do let label equals UI label. Open the parenthesis, return this label instance, so that way it would stop throwing us some errors. So there must be labels for the title. So for that we should do text alignment, that would be center. Then what we can do is that we can add some font to it. So label.font should be equal to UI font dot system font. Okay, then we can have of size 20 pixels, and then we can have some weight here. So weight should be like semi bold. And then what we can do is that we can use label dot text color basically, and the text color would be dot label, which is a color of text that contains primary content. So this is some predefined grayish tone inside Swift UI, so that is what we are going to use. We can add this property adjust font size to fit width, which should be true. Then what we can do is that we can add label dot minimum scale factor, which is set to like 0.9, so that way it would help us to not shrink it too much. Then we can have label dot line break mode, and this should be by truncating the tail basically. So if in case the message is too long, label dot translate auto resizing mask to false, and then our label is complete. Now what we would do is that we would create a private var message label, which would again be of the type UI label. So we can just copy this entire thing out, paste it here, call this one message label. Now this time it's also a UI label, but then we should have some text alignment to left. Then what we can do is that for the color we can have secondary label because it's the message. Then we have the preferred, we can have system font, or we can have preferred font dot body. So this is what we are giving it to here. Then we can do label dot adjust font size category to true. So this is there. Now we can have font size to width, that is fine. We have the text color laid out, we have the minimum scale factor to like 0.75. Then we have the line break mode by word wrapping because we don't want to truncate the tail. It would be better if we just wrap the whole thing inside the alert box. So that is what we are going for here. Now what we can do is that we can create another action button. So private lazy var, we would name this action button. Let's just quickly name this action button. It would be UI button. Then we can open this up, we can do this. Now let's do let button equals UI button, and this UI button would have a type, and this type would be system. So this is there. Then we can add some configuration to the button. So basically I want the button to have this tinted style. So for that we will use UI button dot configuration dot tinted. So that would give it the tinted style. So we can have configuration dot corner style also. Let's keep it medium. And then we can have, or do we have anything else, like do we have capsule? Let's go for capsule. Then we can have configuration dot base background color. For the base background color we can select button color, which is again some property we could add in our view controller, or I'm just thinking that, okay, so we can add three variables here basically. First would be the alert title, which would be optional type string. This is there. Then we can have the message, which would again be of the type optional string. Then we can have a button title, which would again be of the type option string. And we can have the button color. Why am I giving it a custom button color is the reason because sometimes we would show it for success and sometimes we would show it for failure cases. So in that case we would need to pass in yellow and everything. So now we can just safely pass our button color here. This would work. Then let's add configuration dot base foreground color, and for that we can add button color. See, if we just go about it, it's kind of simple only. Like, okay, it has its own way of writing, although the things are pretty self-explanatory, that you are defining the button configuration and just setting it. So that is quite simple, I would say. Let's have an OK title for our button, and the control state should be normal. And final thing is button dot translate auto resizing mask to false. Now what we can do is we can return the button here, and yeah, this seems fine. Now what we can do is that we can add some padding constant as well. Padding would be required inside the alert box. So let's just go cg float and let's add 20. This is there. What all I have done so far, basically in order to use some elements inside our UI view controller, we have defined four properties. One is the container view, then there's the title label, the message label, the action button, and some properties that we'll take in from the user. I mean, us basically will passing different at different places. So let's just make the init, and this was an autocomplete, so really cool. We can do super dot init, and we can have this as nil and the bundle as nil as well. And yep, what we can do is that we cannot give it a default value. rather we would have force our input to give us some values in order to paste them. So yeah, this is there. Now it says that we need a required initializer, so let's add the required init, and the required init would actually need an ns coder, and for that we can just pass in a fatal error, although we know that we are not using any storyboards or anything, so it won't cause an issue. We can say init coder has not been implemented. This case will only occur in case we are initializing from a storyboard and we have laid it out in programmatic way. So completely not required for us. View.did_load is also a predefined function here. So what we can do is that we can write super.view.did_load. That's the first thing we need to do. We can set some background color for our view, so that is what we are going to do here. UI color dot black dot alpha component, which would be like 0.75. This seems fine. Now what we can do is we can write a function to configure UI, and we can call that function from here. So let's just write configure UI. We can call this function out from here, so let's just paste it here. This seems fine. Now what we can do is that we can configure each element separately. So this is what we are going to do. So now let's just start by configuring the configure container, and for the container let's make the C capital, and we can close parentheses, and this is there. Now first thing to do is to add it to the subview. So container view is added to the subview. Now we open this ns layout constraint basically, and then we click activate so that we can add multiple arrays of constraints. Constraints are simply the things that allow icons to stay at their place, the objects, the elements, not just icons. So that is what we are going to do here. And I think a minimum of 4 constraints are required in order to work with UIKit. So let's just start by using the Y anchor. Then we constrained it to view dot center Y anchor. So basically we are constraining it to the center. Now let's do container view dot center x anchor dot constrain, and we will center it again to view dot center x anchor because it's the main container, so we need to keep it centered with the view. Now we give the container view some width, so it should have some constraint, and this should be equal to constant. Let's give it a constant value of like 200 instead of defining how its relationship is going to be like with its adjacent views. And now we can do height anchor dot constraint, and equal to constant should be 220. I was thinking that I should make one video about working with UIKit as well, so I would actually look into that and make that up because that would help you understand things better. Here I'm going a bit fast because like it's just one allowed view, so that is why I just wanted to show you how we could use the whole thing. What we can do is we can just copy this whole thing out. Now we call this title label, and then we need to add inside title label, and we would add it inside our container view instead of the view. So this is there. We can add title label dot text equals alert title, and if it's empty we can add something went wrong. So hopefully it's never empty, we would get to know. Now what we need to do is we need to use title label, and we need to do top anchor dot constraint, which is equal to container view dot top anchor, and we give it some constant with the padding we had predefined. So this is there. We can just remove this out. Now what we can do is that we have the top anchor setup. Now we can do the leading anchor constraint container view dot leading anchor, and then again some padding. Then we can have the trailing anchor, and it should be aligned with the trailing anchor. Basically, leading is left side, trailing is the right side, top is the top, and the bottom is again the same thing. Now we can give it a final constraint, which would be the height anchor, and we can have it some constraint equal to constant, which would be like 20 pixels. We no longer need all this, so we can remove it. Now we have configured our title label as well, and notice how I am calling it after I'm calling the container view. It's not because I've written it after, but because we are adding the container view to the view in this function. So this needs to be called in order for this to work, or else it would throw us a crash. So we ideally don't want that, so that is there. Now we can add a function to configure action button. So that is what we are going to do here now. Now we would do container view dot add sub view, and it would take in the action button, and then the action button would have few things done to itself. So set title would actually be a button title, else let's keep it empty, or let's keep it okay, and the control state would again be normal. Notice that we are already setting the title inside the button, but then we are using the button title text to set it again when we are setting the UI. Just we are being cautious about adding the functionality. And now you see, you give the add target function actually provides the button with the functionality it would call when this button is pressed. So in order to work with that, we actually need to add an objective C function. So it would be in small case objective C. We should say func dismiss, and it's dismiss. This is there. Now we can open this up. We can add the dismiss property. It should be true. And now what we can do is that if we just go above inside the button, we need to add the target to cell. So when the button is tapped, then we add a selector which takes in an objective C method, and we can pass in our dismiss, and the dismiss is there. Do we need to call parenthesis? I don't think so. We don't need to. So this is there. Now we can do in what state it would call it. So that would be touch up inside. So this is there. ns layout constraint dot activate. Then it takes in an array. We come inside here. We add action button dot bottom anchor, so it would be at the very end of the screen, I mean the whole alert. So let's do it equal to, and it should have container view dot bottom anchor, and the constant should be padding again. Let's just copy this thing out 4 times. So 1 2 3 4. Now we would talk about the leading anchor, and the leading anchor would be container view dot leading anchor, and the constant is again padding. There's the trailing anchor. Let's just go back. Let's add the trailing anchor, and then we need to add the trailing anchor here as well with again some padding, and then we can finally give it some height anchor. So we can add some commas here which would make it work. So basically this is there. We have the height anchor, and then we have a constraint which would be equal to constant, and instead of all this we can remove this. We would give our button some height, so that could be 50 pixels. We can just add one more comma here, so I think this might be used. Let's name it dismiss vc so that it could work well, and most probably this error will go, and it says container view is not optional. Obviously it's not optional, so this is there. Let's just remove it from here. Now that we have added this also, let's just call it inside our configure UI function. This is done. What we would do now is that we would write the final functionality for body label. So let's do func. We can just use title label here. So we will call this configure body label. Now what we would do is that we would add the message label here, and unable to complete, let's write a fallback unable to complete request. This seems fine. We need message here instead of alert title. This is there. We need to have message label dot text, then we need to have message label, message label, message label, again and again. Then it should be bound to title label and not the container view. So this is there. The constant should be like 8 pixels, not a lot, from the top anchor, and basically it should be aligned. So from the bottom of our title, 8 pixels below the top of our message label starts, and then we have the bottom anchor, which should be like above the action button. So action button dot top anchor, and the constant would be like -8 or something. So it should be above. Then we have the leading anchor, and leading anchor would have some container view dot leading anchor, and the constant can be padding. And then we can have a trailing anchor as well, and this would be a trailing anchor. Trailing anchor would be container view dot trailing anchor with a padding, and this should be minus padding actually. So let's just see that if I've missed that minus thing elsewhere as well. So in the bottom you actually need minus, and also for the trailing you need minus, so make sure of doing that. So also here in the configure title label, this thing with the trailing anchor should be minus, because it works in a similar way, like left is positive and this trailing side is termed negative, and when you are laying out terms in UIKit. So this is there. Now I will just quickly run you through the whole functionality. Basically we just created a class which is called custom alert view controller, which is of the type UI view controller. Now in UIKit, unlike Swift UI, if you have to lay out some views, you first define them. So that is what we have done by using private lazy var properties. And now since it's a class and it's no longer a structure, if we define some properties and not give them any value, we need an initializer. And in order for the initializers to work in UIKit, you have to override the default initializer, and then you just add the required in it as well. In case if you're using storyboards, that is required, and in our case it's not, so we just add a fatal error here. And then what you do is that we use the viewDidLoad method. It's similar to onAppear on Swift UI, and it's called every time the view appears. No, it's only called only once when the view appears for the first time. There's this I think view did appear function also, which is called every time the view appears. So basically what we are doing is that we are setting up some background color for the view, and then we are configuring the UI. Inside our UI function, we are just calling all the configuring UI functions, and we are configuring our container first of all with the view. We are giving it some defined height and width, and centering the X and Y anchor. Then what we are doing is that we are laying out constraints for title label, then our button, and then our message body label. And this all seems fine. And you know why I did the body label at very last is because it's utilizing action button, title label, and everything. So it needs to have that those constraints laid out before referencing to their constraints. And whenever in UIKit you are working with the bottom side or the trailing side, you actually need to work with negative, because it's sort of a norm in UIKit. So this is what we have done so much. And a button requires an Objective-C method, so we wrote that to dismiss the view itself. This is there. Now in the next video we will actually create a file where we would mention all the list of errors that we can have in all these functions, and then we can link them together and use it inside our functions to see how does it turn out to be. So I hope to see in the next video. Again, I would try to link some UIKit video with this course itself, but I was thinking I would have hold together another course for UIKit because it's such a detailed topic, but I will see to it. Thank you for watching, and if you have any doubts, please leave them down in the comments. I would be happy to help you.